A first-class ticket in her hand was supposed to be her passport to comfort a well-earned luxury before the most important presentation of her career. But for Dr. Imani Hayes, it became a ticket to public humiliation. At the gate, a woman with a badge and a heart full of ice looked her in the eye and delivered a verdict as cold as the polished airport floor: "There is no seat for you." In that crowded terminal, under the fluorescent glare, prejudice wore a uniform. But what no one knew was that the real power wasn't at the gate. It was in the cockpit. And in seconds, the pilot's voice would crackle over the intercom, delivering an announcement that would not only silence the entire terminal, but would unleash a storm of consequences that no one saw coming. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual symphony of chaos. The frantic clicking of rolling suitcases, the distant garbled melody of final boarding calls, and the low hum of thousands of conversations blending into a single anxious note. For Dr. Imani Hayes, however, it was all just background noise. She clutched the handle of her carry-on, a sleek leather briefcase containing the culmination of 5 years of relentless work, her research on pediatric cardiac mitigation strategies. At 34, Imani had already carved out a name for herself in a field dominated by men twice her age. She was a pediatric cardiologist, and not just any cardiologist. Her work was revolutionary, poised to save the lives of children born with the cruelest of congenital heart defects. Tomorrow, she was scheduled to be the keynote speaker at the World Health Symposium in Geneva, Switzerland. It was the pinnacle of her career to date, a moment she had sacrificed countless nights of sleep and social gatherings for. Her first-class ticket for Transatlantic Airways Flight 112 was a rare, deliberate indulgence. It was a gift to herself, a recognition of her own hard work. It meant a lie-flat bed to rest on the overnight flight, ensuring she would arrive in Geneva refreshed and ready to command the stage. She'd paid for it months in advance, carefully selecting her seat, 2B, a quiet aisle seat in the forward cabin. As she approached Gate B23, she noticed the crowd was larger and more agitated than usual. A small digital sign blinked with an unwelcome word: delayed. A collective groan rippled through the passengers. Imani checked her watch. A 2-hour delay. It was frustrating, but it wouldn't jeopardize her connection. She found a seat near the window, pulled out her tablet, and began to review her presentation one last time, her focus a shield against the rising tide of traveler frustration around her. The gate was presided over by a woman whose name tag read Karen Foster. She was a woman in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob that looked as rigid as her posture. Her face was set in a permanent mask of strained patience, as if every passenger's question was a personal affront. Imani watched her for a moment. She saw how Karen's tone sharpened when speaking to a flustered elderly couple, and how she barely made eye contact with a young family trying to wrangle 3 small children. There was a palpable air of resentment about her, a sense of someone who felt the world owed them something it had failed to deliver. Imani dismissed the thought and returned to her slides, her mind tracing the complex pathways of the human heart. An hour bled into the next. Finally, the electronic sign flickered to life, now reading boarding. A wave of relief washed over the waiting passengers as they began to gather, forming messy, unofficial lines. The pre-boarding announcement for passengers needing extra assistance and families with small children came and went. Then Karen Foster's voice, sharp and metallic, cut through the air. "We will now begin boarding our first-class cabin passengers. Please have your boarding pass and passport ready." Imani packed her tablet away, took a deep, steadying breath, and joined the short, privileged line. She felt a familiar, quiet pride. She had earned this. Every late night in the lab, every life she'd helped save it, had all led to this moment of recognition, this small symbol of success. When her turn came, she stepped forward and offered the gate agent a warm, polite smile. "Good evening," Imani said, placing her passport and boarding pass on the scanner. Karen Foster didn't return the smile. She didn't even meet her eyes. Her gaze was fixed on the screen in front of her, her lips pursed into a thin, disapproving line. The scanner beeped a flat, negative sound. Karen tapped a few keys with aggressive, sharp movements. Tap, tap, tap. "There seems to be a problem," Karen said, her voice devoid of any warmth or concern. Imani's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, I confirmed my flight just this morning. Seat 2B. Karen finally looked up, her blue eyes scanning Imani from head to toe. It wasn't a glance. It was an assessment, a judgment. She took in Imani's stylish but professional attire, her intricate braids, her dark skin. A flicker of something cold and ugly passed through her eyes before being masked by a veneer of corporate procedure. "The system is showing this seat has been reassigned," she said flatly. The cabin was overbooked. Imani's brows furrowed. "Overbooked? I booked this ticket 6 months ago and selected my seat then. How could it be reassigned without any notification?" "System glitches happen," Karen replied with a dismissive shrug, as if discussing a misplaced piece of luggage rather than a person's confirmed international travel. She gestured vaguely toward the crowded economy line. "We can try to find you something in the main cabin." The casual indifference in her tone was like a slap in the face. This wasn't about a glitch. This was about something else entirely. Imani could feel it in the pit of her stomach. The dismissive tone, the refusal to make eye contact, the subtle way she was being pushed aside. "I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable," Imani said, her voice remaining calm and level, a skill she'd honed in high-stress medical situations. "I paid for a first-class ticket, and I have a confirmation for seat 2B. Could you please check again? Perhaps speak to a supervisor." Just then, a portly man, in an expensive-looking but ill-fitting suit, bustled past Imani, cutting the line. "Richard Sterling," he announced, slapping his passport down. "I was told my upgrade cleared." Karen's entire demeanor shifted. A tight, artificial smile spread across her face. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Right this way." She scanned his pass, which beeped with a cheerful affirmative chime. "We have you in 2B, a lovely seat." The air left Imani's lungs. 2B. Her seat. She looked from Karen's smiling face to the smug expression on Richard Sterling's as he sauntered down the jet bridge. The blatant, undisguised discrimination was breathtaking. Imani turned back to Karen, her voice now edged with steel. "You just gave that man my seat, my confirmed pre-selected seat." Karen's fake smile vanished, replaced by an icy glare. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "Look, I don't know what you think you're entitled to, but our Platinum Medallion members get priority. The cabin is full." She then raised her voice for all to hear, a cruel performance for the growing audience. "Ma'am, you are holding up the line. We don't have a seat for you in first class." Then came the 5 words that would hang in the air like poison, spoken with a chilling finality, a casual cruelty that was meant to crush her. "There's no seat for you." For a moment, Imani was stunned into silence. It wasn't just about a seat on an airplane anymore. It was about her visibility, her worthiness, her right to occupy a space she had rightfully earned. In Karen Foster's eyes, she, Dr. Imani Hayes, a keynote speaker and a lifesaver, was invisible. She was less than the man who had just breezed past her. The humiliation was a hot flush that spread up her neck, but she refused to let it show in her eyes. She would not give this woman the satisfaction. "I would like to speak to your manager," Imani said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Right now." Karen let out a short, humorless laugh. "He's busy. Now, are you going to step aside, or are we going to have a problem?" The line behind Imani was growing restless. People were muttering. Some shot her sympathetic glances, but most just stared, eager for the drama, but unwilling to intervene. She was alone, isolated in a bubble of injustice. She stood her ground, her heart pounding a furious rhythm against her ribs. She was a fighter. She fought for the tiny, fragile hearts of infants. She would certainly fight for her own dignity. But she never imagined the ally who was about to step into the ring. A hush was beginning to fall over the immediate vicinity of the gate desk. The confrontation, which had started as a low murmur of disagreement, had now escalated into a tense standoff. Imani stood firm, her posture radiating a quiet defiance that seemed to infuriate Karen Foster even more. The other passengers, initially impatient, were now captivated by the raw, unfolding drama. "Ma'am, for the last time." Karen hissed, her voice a low growl of authority. "Step out of the line. You are delaying the departure of this aircraft." "And for the last time," Imani countered, her voice unwavering. "I am a ticketed first-class passenger with a confirmed seat assignment. You gave my seat to another passenger without cause or notice. I will not be moved until I speak with a manager." From the jet bridge, a flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Sarah Jenkins, had witnessed the exchange. She had seen Richard Sterling board with a triumphant smirk and had overheard Karen's final cutting remark. An alarm bell of deep unease rang in her mind. This was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. She had seen Karen on power trips before, but this was different. This was malicious. Making a quick decision, Sarah slipped back out of the aircraft and hurried toward the cockpit. The door was ajar. Inside, Captain David Campbell and his first officer, Mike Sorensen, were finalizing their pre-flight checks. Captain Campbell was a man who commanded respect without demanding it. In his early 50s, with flecks of gray at his temples and calm, discerning blue eyes, he had the steady demeanor of a man who had spent 30 years landing multi-ton machines in crosswinds and thunderstorms. He was known for his meticulous professionalism and his unshakable sense of fairness. "Captain," Sarah said softly, hesitating at the threshold. Campbell looked up from his checklist. "Sarah, everything all right back there? We've got a full house tonight." "Not exactly, Captain," she said, her brow furrowed with worry. "There's a situation at the gate, with Karen. She's refusing to board a first-class passenger, a black woman. She told her there was no seat for her and gave her assigned seat to a last-minute upgrade. It's getting ugly." Captain Campbell's posture straightened. He and Karen Foster had a history not of direct conflict, but of observation. He'd seen her curtness, her barely veiled disdain for anyone she deemed beneath her. He exchanged a knowing glance with his first officer. An operational delay caused by a gate agent's power play was the last thing he needed, but Sarah's description hinted at something far more serious than a simple seating error. "Keep the cabin door open, Sarah. I'll be right there," he said, his voice calm, but with a new hard edge to it. He unbuckled his harness and stood up. As he walked from the cockpit through the forward galley, he could see the scene at the gate clearly through the open door of the aircraft. He saw Dr. Imani Hayes standing with an incredible dignified poise, and he saw Karen Foster, her face a mask of pinched fury. He saw the other passengers staring, some with discomfort, some with morbid curiosity. He didn't step out immediately. He stood in the shadow of the doorway, observing, listening. "If you don't move, I will have airport security escort you from the gate." Karen threatened, her finger hovering over the phone. "Is that what you want? To be arrested?" The threat of security, of escalation, of turning the victim into the perpetrator was a classic tactic of a bully. For Imani, it was a terrifying prospect. An arrest, even a wrongful one, would mean a missed flight, a missed conference. It could derail everything she had worked for. Doubt began to creep in. Was it worth it? Should she just swallow this injustice and try to get on the plane even in a cramped middle seat at the back? Then she thought of the young black girls she mentored, the ones she encouraged to enter. STEM fields, telling them that their brilliance and hard work would allow them to transcend any barrier. What would she be teaching them if she backed down now? She lifted her chin. "You will do what you feel you have to do," Imani said, her voice clear and resonant. "And I will do the same. And I assure you, my actions will be to file a formal complaint with the Department of Transportation and a civil lawsuit against this airline and you personally for discriminatory practices." The mention of a lawsuit of personal liability made Karen flinch. But before she could formulate a response, a new voice entered the fray, a voice of absolute, unquestionable authority. "That won't be necessary." Captain David Campbell stepped out of the jet bridge and onto the carpet of the terminal. He moved with an unhurried, deliberate pace that drew every eye in the room. His pilot's uniform, with its 4 gold stripes on the epaulets, was more than just a costume. It was a symbol of ultimate responsibility for every soul on his aircraft and for the integrity of the operation. He didn't look at Imani first. His calm, piercing gaze landed directly on Karen Foster. He stopped beside the podium, a silent, powerful presence. "Mrs. Foster." He began, his voice quiet, but carrying easily through the now silent terminal. "Is there a problem with one of my passengers?" The use of "my passengers" was intentional. It was a subtle claim of ownership and protection. Karen was visibly startled. Pilots rarely intervened in gate matters. "Captain Campbell," she stammered, her authoritative facade crumbling slightly. "This woman is refusing to accept her seat assignment and is holding up our departure." She tried to frame it as Imani being the problem. The captain's gaze didn't waver. He turned his head slowly, his eyes finally meeting Imani's. He offered her a small, respectful nod, a gesture that acknowledged her presence and her dignity in a way no one else had. Then he looked back at Karen. "I overheard the conversation," he said, his tone still deceptively mild. "I heard you tell her there was no seat for her. I also heard her state that she is a ticketed first-class passenger. Could you please show me the passenger manifest for my flight?" It was a request, but it sounded like an order. Karen's face paled. The manifest was the official record. It would show exactly when Imani had booked, when she had been assigned her seat, and when and for whom it had been changed. It was the paper trail of her discrimination. "Captain, our system is proprietary. I can handle this." She started to deflect. "The manifest, please, Ms. Foster." He repeated, his voice dropping a decibel, yet gaining an intensity that made the air crackle. "As the captain of this aircraft, I am legally responsible for everyone on board. I need to see the manifest to resolve this issue and ensure we can depart safely. Now." With trembling hands, Karen tapped at her keyboard and printed the list. Her face was ashen. The game was over, and she knew it. The captain was not just a pilot. He was the final authority. His word was law. He took the printed sheets, and his eyes scanned them quickly. He was a man trained to find anomalies in complex instrument panels in fractions of a second. It took him less than 10 seconds to find what he was looking for. He saw her name, Hayes Imani, and next to it, the original seat assignment 2B, and then a time-stamped notation, seat change, authorized K. Foster, priority override, and the name of the new passenger, Sterling Richard. He looked up from the paper, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning with a cold fire. He had all the proof he needed. The silence in the terminal was absolute. Every passenger, every airline employee within earshot was frozen, waiting for the verdict. Imani's heart was hammering against her ribs, a mix of terror and a fragile, burgeoning hope. Captain Campbell folded the manifest neatly and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He turned and faced the waiting passengers. He then reached for the gooseneck microphone on the podium, the one Karen had used to announce the boarding. He pressed the button, and the small, almost imperceptible click echoed through the gate area like a gavel. The small click of the microphone being activated was followed by a soft burst of static, a sound that sliced through the thick, expectant silence of Gate B-23. Every eye was fixed on Captain Campbell. He stood tall behind the podium, the printed manifest a damning piece of evidence tucked safely in his breast pocket. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a judge, and this crowded gate area had become his courtroom. He cleared his throat, and his voice, amplified by the PA system, was not loud or angry. It was something far more powerful, calm, measured, and utterly resolute. It was the voice of a man in complete control, not just of a 200-ton aircraft, but of the moral compass of the situation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain David Campbell of Transatlantic Flight 112 to Geneva. He paused, letting his title settle in the air, a reminder of his authority. We have a delay in our boarding process, and for that I apologize. Punctuality is as important to us as it is to you. However, an issue has been brought to my attention that requires immediate and public clarification. His eyes swept over the crowd, then settled for a brief, reassuring moment on Imani, before moving to stare directly at Karen Foster, who seemed to shrink behind the counter. It has come to my attention, he continued, his voice as steady as a flight path in clear skies, that a passenger, a paying confirmed first-class passenger, has been denied her rightful seat on this aircraft. This passenger, Dr. Imani Hayes, booked her ticket and selected her seat months in advance. He let that sink in. He had used her name and her professional title. In that moment, he gave her back the identity and respect that Karen had tried to strip away. She was no longer just this woman, or the black girl. She was Dr. Hayes. The murmurs in the crowd shifted from impatient grumbling to intrigued whispers. Due to what I can only describe as a gross error in judgment at this gate, the captain went on his words, chosen with surgical precision. Dr. Hayes's seat was improperly and unethically given away to another passenger moments ago. She was then told there was no seat for her. He repeated the cruel words, "No seat for you." And in the sterile echo of the airport PA system, they sounded even more vile, more profoundly unjust. A wave of audible gasps rippled through the passengers. Faces that had been impassive with travel fatigue now showed shock and dawning outrage. Let me be unequivocally clear. Captain Campbell's voice hardened, losing its pleasantries and taking on the unyielding quality of command. On my aircraft, there is a seat for everyone who has purchased a ticket in good faith. On my aircraft, we do not tolerate discrimination of any kind, whether it is based on race, religion, gender, or the class of your ticket. Our company values, and more importantly, the basic tenets of human decency, are not optional extras that can be discarded at an employee's whim. Karen Foster's face had gone from pale to a mottled, blotchy red. She looked like she wanted the polished floor to swallow her whole. She stared at the captain, her mouth slightly agape, a portrait of disbelief and public humiliation. But the captain wasn't finished. This wasn't just about reprimanding a gate agent. It was about making things right. Therefore, we will be rectifying this situation immediately. Dr. Hayes will, of course, be taking her assigned seat in 2B. I will personally escort her onto the aircraft to ensure she is settled in comfortably. He then delivered the twist that no one, least of all the passenger in 2B, was expecting. This means we have a passenger currently occupying a seat that does not belong to him. I will need Mr. Richard Sterling in seat 2B to please come back to the gate desk. Mr. Sterling, your last-minute upgrade has been cancelled. A flight attendant will assist you in finding your original seat in the main cabin. If one is not available, we will be happy to book you on the next flight tomorrow morning. The silence that followed was deafening. Every head turned toward the jet bridge, waiting for the walk of shame. A few moments later, Richard Sterling appeared, his face a thundercloud of indignation. He stomped toward the desk, ready for a fight. "What is the meaning of this?" He blustered, his voice loud and self-important. "I'm a Platinum Medallion member. My upgrade was confirmed." Captain Campbell didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned from the microphone and looked Sterling dead in the eye. "Sir," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "your upgrade was confirmed at the expense of another passenger's dignity and confirmed booking. That is not an upgrade. That is theft. You will return to your original cabin, or you will be removed from my flight entirely. The choice is yours. We will be departing shortly." Sterling's blustering deflated like a punctured balloon. Faced with the unyielding authority of the captain and the 100 pairs of accusing eyes on him, he knew he had lost. With a muttered curse, he snatched his new downgraded boarding pass from a stunned gate agent and stomped back toward the plane, his face burning with shame. A spontaneous, scattered applause broke out among the passengers. It started with a few people and quickly spread. They weren't just clapping for the pilot. They were clapping for the restoration of order, for the simple, satisfying victory of right over wrong. Captain Campbell ignored the applause. He turned off the microphone and walked over to Imani, his expression softening. "Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice now gentle, "on behalf of Transatlantic Airways and personally, I am profoundly sorry for how you were treated. This never should have happened. May I please escort you to your seat?" Imani, who had stood through the entire ordeal with a strength she didn't know she possessed, finally felt the emotional dam begin to break. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness or humiliation, but of overwhelming relief and gratitude. A stranger, a man in a position of power, had not just looked away. He had seen her, and he had stood up for her without hesitation. "Thank you, Captain," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." "It's my honor," he said simply. He offered her his arm, a gesture of old-world chivalry that felt both profound and deeply comforting. As he led her down the jet bridge past the now silent and utterly defeated Karen Foster, the world seemed to shift on its axis. The humiliation she had felt just minutes before was being washed away, replaced by a powerful sense of vindication. But as she stepped onto the plane, neither she nor Captain Campbell could possibly imagine the true extent of the shockwaves his announcement had just set in motion. The drama at Gate B-23 was over. The story, however, was just beginning. Boarding the aircraft on the arm of Captain Campbell was a surreal experience for Imani. The flight attendants in the forward galley greeted her with warm, sympathetic smiles. The The very air inside the plane felt different, charged with the energy of the event that had just transpired. As they walked down the aisle of the first-class cabin, she saw Richard Sterling crammed into a middle seat in the premium economy section, his face turned stubbornly toward the window, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. When they reached seat 2B, Captain Campbell paused. "Dr. Hayes, if there is anything at all you need during this flight, anything you let Sarah or her team know, and they will take care of it." "You've already done more than enough, Captain," Imani said finally, finding her voice. "I don't know how to thank you." "By getting to Geneva and giving the best damn speech of your life," he replied with a warm smile. "We can't let ignorance win." With a final nod, he retreated to the cockpit. As Imani settled into the plush leather seat, her seat the lead flight attendant, Sarah, leaned in. "Dr. Hayes, can I get you a glass of champagne before we take off? On the house, of course." "I would love that," Imani said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. As the ground crew made their final preparations for departure, another figure appeared at the gate. Mr. Thompson, the JFK station manager for Transatlantic Airways. He was a harried-looking man, his tie slightly askew, clearly having been summoned from his office to deal with the fallout. He had been alerted by another gate agent, who had witnessed the captain's unprecedented intervention. His first stop was Karen Foster. She stood frozen behind the counter, her face a blank mask of shock. The last of the economy passengers were shuffling past her, many of them shaking their heads in disgust. She was now the object of public scorn. "Karen, my office. Now," Thompson said, his voice a low, furious command. There was no room for discussion. He then boarded the plane and went directly to the cockpit. "David, what the hell happened out there?" Thompson demanded, keeping his voice down. "You can't just commandeer a gate announcement and publicly dress down my staff." Captain Campbell turned in his seat, his expression unyielding. "I can and I will bill when your staff engages in blatant discrimination that threatens the safety and integrity of my flight. I have the manifest. I have dozens of witnesses. Your agent, Ms. Foster, illegally denied boarding to a confirmed passenger based on, from what I can see, nothing but the color of her skin. She then gave that passenger's seat to a frequent flyer as a bribe for his loyalty. That's not just bad customer service, it's a potential lawsuit that this company will lose, and deservedly so. I did what was necessary to rectify the situation and get this plane off the ground. My report on the matter will be on your boss's desk before we land in Geneva." Thompson paled. He knew Campbell wasn't a man who made idle threats. He was meticulous, respected, and had a spotless record. His word against Karen Foster's was no contest. The station manager backed out of the cockpit, his anger replaced by a dawning sense of corporate dread. He then approached Imani's seat. He knelt by her side, adopting a posture of extreme contrition. "Dr. Hayes," he began, his voice oozing with practiced sincerity. "I am William Thompson, the station manager. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for the unacceptable behavior you were subjected to. Please accept my deepest apologies. We will be refunding your ticket in full and awarding you 200,000 bonus miles for your trouble." Imani looked at him, her expression cool. The apology felt hollow, a calculated move of damage control rather than genuine remorse. "Your apology is noted, Mr. Thompson. However, the issue isn't my compensation. It's the fact that this happened at all. What are you going to do to ensure it doesn't happen to anyone else?" Thompson was momentarily speechless. We will be conducting a full and thorough investigation," he stammered. "I hope so." Imani said, then turned to look out the window, a clear dismissal. The flight to Geneva was ironically one of the most pleasant of her life. The flight crew treated her like royalty. Passengers who passed her seat on the way to the lavatory would give her small smiles and nods of support. One woman, a young lawyer who had been standing behind her in line, slipped her a business card. "I recorded the whole thing," she whispered. "The pilot's announcement, everything. If you need a witness, call me." Imani tucked the card away, a wave of gratitude washing over her. She hadn't been as alone as she had felt. While Imani slept soundly over the Atlantic, the ripples from the incident were already spreading. Back in New York, Karen Foster was suspended pending an investigation that everyone knew had a foregone conclusion. She left the airport that night in a daze, the captain's amplified voice still ringing in her ears. But the most significant ripple was started by the young lawyer. As soon as the plane reached cruising altitude and the Wi-Fi was switched on, she edited the video she had taken on her phone, a clear recording of Captain Campbell's entire speech, and posted it to her Twitter account tagging Transatlantic Airways. She added a simple caption, "At JFK Gate agent for @Transatlantic Air tells black woman with first-class ticket, no seat for you." What happened next? The pilot stepped in and delivered the most epic dose of justice I've ever seen. This captain is a hero. By the time Flight 112 began its descent into Geneva, the video had 10,000 views. By the time Imani had collected her luggage, it had 100,000. By the time she checked into her hotel, it had crossed 1 million and was trending worldwide. The story had a hero, Captain Campbell. It had a villain, Karen Foster, whose face was not clearly visible, but was described in hundreds of comments. And it had a victim who had become a symbol of grace under pressure, Dr. Imani Hayes. News outlets were already picking up the story. The small, ugly incident at Gate B-23 was no longer a private matter. It was a global news event, and the real karma, the hard, life-altering karma, was just beginning to warm up. The viral tsunami hit Transatlantic Airways' corporate headquarters in Chicago with the force of a hurricane. On Monday morning, CEO Mark O'Connell walked into his office to a crisis of epic proportions. The stock was down 7% in pre-market trading. The hashtag #FlyWithCampbell was trending, but so was #boycott_transatlantic. Every major news network had run a segment on the JFK Airport Angel pilot. Their PR department was in full meltdown. Their initial bland statement about investigating the incident and being committed to diversity was being roasted online as a pathetic, tone-deaf response. The video, now with over 50 million views across various platforms, was a public relations nightmare. In it, Richard Sterling's indignant red-faced protest was clearly visible, making him a secondary villain in the public's eye. O'Connell slammed his fist on his desk. "Get me the pilot's name," he roared at his assistant. "It's Captain David Campbell, sir," she replied timidly. 32 years with the company. Flawless record. Ex-Air Force. "I don't care if he's a saint," O'Connell seethed. "He aired our dirty laundry in a terminal full of people with smartphones. He took a customer service issue and turned it into an international incident." But even as he raged, O'Connell knew he was trapped. Captain Campbell was now a folk hero. Firing or even reprimanding him would be corporate suicide. They would be seen as punishing the one person who did the right thing. He was untouchable. Their only move was to lean into it. A new press release was drafted. Captain Campbell was praised for his decisive action and for embodying the core values of Transatlantic Airways. The Karen Foster was publicly terminated for behavior not in keeping with our company's commitment to equality and respect for all our passengers. They announced the formation of a new diversity and inclusion task force to review all their training protocols. It was a masterclass in corporate spin, but the damage was already done. Meanwhile, for Karen Foster, the world had collapsed. Her name had been leaked on a message board for airline employees and had quickly spread. Her social media profiles were flooded with hateful messages. Reporters were camped outside her modest suburban home. She was a pariah. Fired, disgraced, and unemployable in the industry she had worked in for 25 years. Her bitterness, which had been a simmering pot for years, had finally boiled over and scalded her entire life. She had tried to make one woman feel small and powerless, and in doing so, had rendered herself the most powerless of all. But the most intricate and devastating karmic blow was about to fall on the man in the ill-fitting suit, Richard Sterling. Sterling was not just a frequent flyer. He was a senior vice president at a monolithic private equity firm, Sterling Knight Capital. And Sterling Knight Capital was in the final delicate stages of a multi-billion-dollar merger. Their target: a smaller rival firm that had a major stake in, of all things, the parent company that owned Transatlantic Airways. The deal was contingent on a morality clause, a standard but often overlooked piece of boilerplate that allowed either party to back out if a key executive from the other firm was involved in a scandal that could damage the new entity's reputation. On Monday afternoon, Richard Sterling was summoned to the office of the firm's founder, the formidable old-guard financier Alistair Knight. Knight was sitting behind his enormous mahogany desk, an iPad centered perfectly in front of him. On the screen was a crystal-clear, high-definition still from the viral video. It showed Richard Sterling, his face contorted with smug entitlement, striding down the jet bridge. "Richard," Knight said, his voice dangerously calm. "Is this you?" Sterling's blood ran cold. "Alistair, it's a misunderstanding. The gate agent told me the upgrade was clear. I didn't know the circumstances." "You didn't know?" Knight countered, his eyes like chips of ice. "Or you didn't care? Did you not see the woman you pushed past? Did you not hear the argument? Did you not think to ask why a first-class seat had suddenly materialized on a supposedly full flight?" He swiped his finger across the iPad, and now it showed a dozen headlines from major financial news outlets. Sterling Knight VP embroiled in airline discrimination scandal. Merger prospects questioned as executive's character comes under fire. The board of the company we are trying to acquire convened an emergency meeting an hour ago. Knight continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They are invoking the morality clause. They say your public conduct brings the integrity of our potential partnership into disrepute. The deal, Richard, the deal you've been working on for 2 years is dead. Sterling felt the room spin. No. We can fix this. I can issue a statement. I can apologize. Apologize. Knight let out a dry, harsh laugh. You've cost this firm a potential $10 billion valuation because you couldn't stand the thought of flying economy. You have become a liability of catastrophic proportions. He stood up the motion, signaling the end of the conversation and the end of a career. Clear out your desk. Security will escort you out. Richard Sterling, the man who felt so entitled to another person's seat, had just lost his own. He walked out of that office in a daze, the architect of his own spectacular demise. His desire for a few hours of extra legroom had cost him his job, his reputation, and a $10 billion corporate merger. The karma wasn't just hard. It was brutally, poetically, financially ruinous. While the lives of Karen Foster and Richard Sterling were imploding back in the United States, Imani Hayes was preparing for the biggest moment of her professional life. She had tried to ignore the media storm, but it was impossible. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, family, and colleagues who had seen the video. The organizers of the World Health Symposium had seen it too. She was in her hotel suite, staring at her reflection in the mirror the night before her keynote address. The woman staring back at her felt different from the one who had packed her bags in New York 3 days ago. That woman had been nervous about her speech about proving herself on a global stage. This woman was changed. The incident at the airport had stripped something away, but it had also forged something new in its place, a steely resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Her speech was a technical marvel filled with data charts and complex medical terminology about innovative surgical techniques. It was brilliant. But as she looked at it now, it felt incomplete. It spoke of saving the heart physically, but it said nothing of the other kinds of heartbreaks and injuries the world inflicted. That evening, she received an email. The sender was Captain David Campbell. The airline, in an effort to get ahead of the story, had given him her contact information subject safe and sound. I hope. Dear Dr. Hayes, I hope you arrived well and are settled in. I've been following the news, and I am sorry that our unfortunate encounter has become such a public spectacle. My only hope is that it hasn't overshadowed the important work you are in Geneva to do. I did what any decent person should have done. The uniform doesn't make the man. It just gives him a bigger microphone sometimes. I'm glad I was there to use it. Break a leg tomorrow. I have a feeling your speech will change the world in more ways than one. Sincerely, Captain David Campbell. His words solidified a decision that had been forming in her mind. She put her original speech aside and opened a blank document. She began to type, not just as a doctor, but as a woman who had been tested and had refused to break. The next day, the main auditorium was packed. Thousands of the world's leading medical professionals were in attendance. When Imani was introduced, the applause was thunderous and sustained. They weren't just clapping for the cardiologist, they were clapping for the woman from the video. She walked to the podium, poised and confident. She looked out at the sea of faces. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and strong. My presentation today is titled Anatomy of the Heart Resilience Repair and the Right to Thrive. I was originally going to speak to you only about the physical heart, a remarkable organ of muscle and vessel that we spend our lives trying to mend. She paused, taking a breath. But the events of the past few days have compelled me to amend my focus. Because the heart is more than just a pump. It is the seat of our dignity, our empathy, and our courage. And like the physical heart, it can be bruised, it can be scarred, and it can be broken not by disease, but by indifference and injustice. A hush fell over the massive hall. This was not the speech they were expecting. 3 days ago, at an airport in New York, I was told there was no place for me. A space that I had rightfully secured, that I had earned, was deemed not mine to occupy. I was made to feel that I was invisible. It was an attempt to wound my spirit, to damage my heart, in a way that no scalpel could ever repair. She told the story, not with anger or bitterness, but with the calm, analytical precision of a surgeon. She laid out the facts, the diagnosis of a social sickness. But then, she continued, her voice swelling with emotion, something remarkable happened. A man I had never met, a pilot responsible for hundreds of souls, chose to see me. He chose to use his power not for his own benefit, but to mend an injustice. He performed a kind of surgery right there at the gate, excising a tumor of prejudice with the clean, sharp scalpel of human decency. She connected it back to their shared profession. As doctors, we take an oath to do no harm. But that oath should not be confined to the walls of our hospitals. It must extend to the world. We fight for the hearts of our patients for their right to beat strong and free. But what is the point of saving a child's physical heart only to send them out into a world that will try to break their spirit? A world that may one day tell them for no good reason, there is no seat for you. By the time she finished, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The ovation was deafening. Tears streamed down the faces of hardened surgeons and veteran researchers. She had done more than just give a speech. She had started a conversation, transformed a personal humiliation into a universal lesson on dignity and responsibility. She hadn't just presented her research, she had presented her soul. The news of her powerful, altered speech went viral, adding a new, profound chapter to the ongoing story. Months passed. The storm of the Gate B-23 incident had subsided, but its impact had left the landscape permanently changed. For Karen Foster, life was a barren wasteland. Fired and publicly shamed, she found it impossible to get another job in any customer-facing role. The name Karen Foster was now synonymous with petty bigotry. She ended up working an overnight shift stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store, a solitary, anonymous job. One evening, a young black family came down her aisle laughing and talking. The mother smiled politely at Karen. In that simple human gesture, Karen saw everything she had lost. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet, crushing weight of her own actions. This was her karma, a life sentence of obscurity haunted by the ghost of a decent life she had thrown away in a single, hateful moment. Richard Sterling's fall was even more precipitous. After losing his job and becoming a pariah in the high-stakes world of finance, his wife left him tired of the shame and the social isolation. He was forced to sell his lavish Manhattan apartment and move to a small, nondescript condo. He had lost everything, his career, his wealth, his family, all because he couldn't bear the thought of not getting his way. His karma was a perfect reflection of his crime. A man who had tried to take a space that wasn't his had ended up with no space at all in the world he once dominated. But for Imani Hayes and David Campbell, the incident had become a beginning, not an end. Transatlantic Airways, in a desperate and brilliant PR move, had hired Dr. Imani Hayes as a paid consultant to help them redesign their diversity, equity, and inclusion training programs from the ground up. She accepted not for the money, but for the chance to create systemic change. She worked with them to develop a new training module for all 40,000 employees, a program that used the video of the incident as a case study. It was called the Captain's Standard. Captain Campbell became the face of that standard. He was promoted to chief pilot, a senior management role where he oversaw training and professional conduct for the airline's entire pilot corps. He and Imani became unlikely friends, united by the strange, intense experience they had shared. They spoke often, two professionals at the top of their fields, finding common ground in their shared belief in doing the right thing. About a year after the incident, Imani was at JFK again, this time flying to a conference in London. As she walked through the terminal, she saw a new plaque on the wall near Gate B-23. It was a Transatlantic Airways Distinguished Service Award. On it was a picture of a smiling Captain David Campbell and a quote from his now famous announcement, "On my aircraft, our values are not optional extras." She smiled. She had gotten her justice. Karen and Richard had gotten their karma. But more than that, a moment of ugly discrimination had been transformed into a lasting symbol of integrity, a permanent reminder for every employee and passenger who walked past. As she boarded her flight in her confirmed first-class seat, 2B, the lead flight attendant greeted her. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Hayes. It's an honor to have you with us." Imani took her seat and looked out the window as the ground fell away. The world was vast and full of challenges, but she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that there would always be a seat for her. She had earned it. Dr. Imani Hayes's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the worst moments can bring out the best in people. It shows us that while prejudice and injustice still exist, so do courage, integrity, and the profound power of one person taking a stand. Captain Campbell didn't just save a seat. He restored a woman's dignity and reminded a watching world that our shared humanity should always be our final destination. The hard, swift karma that found Karen Foster and Richard Sterling wasn't magic. It was the natural consequence of their own choices in a world that, thanks to technology, is watching more closely than ever. If this story of justice and resilience resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up to help us share it with more people. Don't forget to click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next story, where right triumphs over wrong. And we want to hear from you. Share a time in the comments below when you saw someone stand up for what was right. Your story matters. Thank you for listening.